People also think that something very fundamental has happened in this country in the long run. 2/3 of Americans say their kids and the next generation will not be better off economically than the current generation. This is the first generation that may not be as well educated as their parents. This is the first generation that, if you control for income level, may not be making as much as their parents. And that's a real fundamental blow to the American psyche. People believe, and all of our families, or most of our families, came over here because it wasn't so great in the old country. In my case, moved from the East Coast to Montana because if it were so great on the East Coast, they would have stayed because they wanted something better for their kids. People also feel that, good Lord, I had to put up with those kids as teenagers. It's really not worth it if they're not going to be better off than I am. So on a personal level, as well as a country level, that is a real indictment of where we are. In terms of your members' approval, things are more divided, and we do have this phenomena of not my guy, the institution, but not my guy. But boy, my guy's in trouble too. A lot of those freshman incumbents are really on the border in terms of their job approval and individual members, and a lot of long-term incumbents. There are going to be some surprises on both sides of the aisle because we are facing a wave election, and that wave election is going to be anti-incumbent. Of course, we have a saying in our party, you may have it in the Republicans too, when your opponents are digging themselves in a hole, don't grab the shovel and don't get in the way. Now, Republicans are pretty good at that. They don't tend to grab the shovel or get in the way. The Democrats are like, oh, can we help you? And we interfere all the time and step on our own stories. But we're being pretty disciplined right now and letting the Republicans attack the Republicans, and they're doing, from our vantage point, a pretty good job of it. I think everything is in play. I think that Democrats could definitely take back the House. I think that Republicans could take the Senate. And I think the presidential will be close, although I think that Obama is really coming out with a pretty strong lead. And in fact, the most recent numbers are pretty positive.
As was mentioned, we've been doing the Battleground now. We're in our 21st year. We have done 5 presidential elections, at which the Battleground Poll has been the closest 3 of the 5 times. We missed one election because we, quite frankly and honestly, stopped polling on a Thursday night, and the Republican candidate, the story broke the next day that he had a DWI. And there was a great deal of movement over that weekend, and then we came back in the last election. There were actually 5 firms that were so close in their prediction of the election that they lumped them all together and said these were the closest. So we kind of right 4 out of the 5 times. You know, one thing I feel very strongly about as a pollster, and there are others, I think Celinda may differ with me sometimes on this, I feel very strongly that polling should never be used to develop policy. It should never be used to tell you what your principles are, what your values are, and where you want to take the country. It should be used to test as you put your message together and monitor as you put your message together. And I'm a very big believer of that. One of the biggest misconceptions about presidential elections is this. Presidential elections, in the off year, everyone's kind of come to understand the off year. Independents don't really vote much, and it's really about parity between the 2 parties and who has more intensity between the 2 parties. That's kind of what a off-year election is all about. Is there a enthusiasm gap? Does one side do a better job in terms of turnout? That's still a factor in a presidential race because you still have about 72% of the voters who vote in a presidential year being from one of the 2 parties, and so you do have the intensity math game that's being played. In this case, still in our favor in all the numbers that we've been looked at. But where I think they get it wrong, they say it right. The independents, which is about 28% of the votes cast, is an important part of the vote in a presidential year. What they don't get is that that's the crapshoot of a presidential election. A different set of independent voters vote in each presidential election, and it is the angry independents who vote.